Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, and I'm thrilled that you're here right now because we're going to talk about something really important that impacts every single one of us. And we're looking today at hormones. Hormonal imbalances are common throughout all the various stages of life, and they can cause a huge range of conditions, including type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism, obesity, fatigue, even cancer. Well, some of the causes of hormonal imbalances are beyond our control. The good news is that you can make a huge positive impact with your diet and lifestyle choices, and the same habits that are good for your hormonal balance are also good for cancer prevention. Today, we're going to be joined by Dr. Ruby Lathon to discuss the role of diet and lifestyle in hormonal balance and to learn how Ruby personally has balanced her hormones and recovered from thyroid cancer using a whole food and plant-centered diet. Now, before I go any further, I do want to be very clear. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. This is coaching. We're going to be sharing our best insights, but of course, you should always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific medical issues and needs. That said, you are going to learn a lot today. This is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community, and some of the questions I will be bringing to this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. Now, let me introduce our guest. Ruby Lathon, PhD, is a certified holistic nutritionist and host of the cooking show, The Veggie Chest. She was featured in the documentaries What the Health and They're Trying to Kill Us. She has served as nutrition policy manager at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. She earned her PhD in industrial and systems engineering and went on to become a prominent voice and an advocate for the life-saving benefits of plant-based nutrition after she personally overcame thyroid cancer. She attended the Washington Institute of Natural Medicine, and through her organization, Roadmap to Holistic Health, Ruby motivates people around the world to take charge of their health, and she provides tools for healthy living. Ruby, it is so good to be with you. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, fantastic. Well, first question, I've got a bunch I want to ask you, and then we've got a whole bunch from our members
Yeah,
in Whole Life Club.
absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
great. So first question I want to ask you is, the optimal hormonal balance changes at different stages of life. And today we've got a growing and an alarming collection of problems emerging that seem to be linked to out of whack hormones, from premature puberty to infertility to problematic menopause to osteoporosis to hormone related cancers. What do you think are some of the biggest sort of systemic reasons or individual reasons that so many folks are out of whack?
Yeah, well, I that's a great question, and I think a lot of it stems from simply we kind of have a lifestyle that's a little out of balance, and what's happening on the outside tends to be what happens on the inside. So, kind of living this fast-paced life of never taking that time to pause and take care of ourselves in a more holistic way often leads to an imbalance. And I personally had, imbalance in my life when I was, diagnosed with thyroid cancer. That was, way back in 2007. And there was a great imbalance of too much work and not enough fun, not enough self-care. And that's when I realized I needed to focus on balance. I needed to focus on my diet. That's when I switched to, the fully plant-based diet and was able to bring things in balance by taking that time off and healing and finding ways that to heal my body naturally. And so that I think that imbalance just in our lifestyle triggers this hormonal imbalances that we're dealing with, in addition to the foods and things that we're eating.
Yeah, absolutely. We also, of course, there's all the environmental factors, which we tend to think of as sort of beyond our control, but obviously we have some impact on our environment as humans on this planet, and we're putting all these
Absolutely.
toxins out there. But some of the environmental factors are also very much in our control. Like, for example, we think of food storage containers as an environmental factor. But
Exactly.
if you're absorbing toxins from your plastic that you're putting your food in,
Mhm,
then obviously that you do have some say in that matter. And our
mhm.
family made the choice, for example, when we learned about the research here, to get rid of all the plastic in our kitchen that we possibly could, and we now store our
Exactly.
food in glass. It's a It's not quite as
Likewise,
convenient, but it works just fine. And you're not poisoning your kids, which I think is a good thing.
I
Um,
agree
so
completely.
air quality, having a simple air filter if you possibly can afford it, drinking clean water, getting a water filter rather than drinking bottled water and plastic. These things all matter and they can make a real difference. So you don't have to detoxify from all these toxins your body isn't equipped to deal with.
I agree completely. And that those are the kind of lifestyle changes that I made. And those could, because those things are, as we'll talk more about, are, disruptors of your hormones. So when I work with people, we talk about not just what foods we're eating, but let's talk about body products we're using. Let's talk about getting rid of the the plastic. And I've got my glass straw right here, for things to get rid of plastics and things that are just really can throw our hormonal balance off as
Yes.
well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do hormones impact thyroid health, and why is thyroid cancer more prevalent in women?
Yeah. So, our thyroid is, produces the hormones that are basically the thermostat for our bodies. So when that is off, a lot of things are off. And the thyroid is very sensitive to stress. And so when we carry a lot of chronic stress, that usually leads to gut imbalances, which also links to thyroid imbalance. And I think part of that is a lot of times women tended to deal with a lot more stress just for things that are happening and have those imbalances. It's really not clear why that's so much more. But one of the things we know that since that's linked to stress and imbalance, that's probably one of those issues there.
Yeah, got it. Um,
Mhm.
what is the connection between nutritional deficiencies and thyroid health? How is the thyroid impacted
Yeah, yeah.
diet?
So there are a lot of things that affect that. So one of them is iodine. We need that's an essential nutrient that we need for thyroid health, and so we want to make sure we're getting that in healthy ways. I usually, consume sea vegetables and seaweeds and things like that to get that healthy source of iodine. Obviously, it's in salt, but we like to use, natural sea salt where it's a little less. And then selenium, a lack of selenium is another nutrient that affects thyroid health. Um, and some of the best sources of that are just simply Brazil nuts, getting those in. But also there's a balance there because you can have too much iodine and too much
Yes.
selenium and too much vitamin A, and those things all affect the hormonal balance as well. So it's getting enough, the essential, but not getting too much. Those are some of the things that definitely affect the balance of thyroid health.
And how do you know? Should people get blood tests for iodine and selenium?
If you're generally, if you're having like something like goiter where your thyroid is enlarged, you would want to get tested for like iodine deficiency first to make sure that's not the issue. So if you're having overall, thyroid problems, those are some tests you want to do. But if you're generally healthy, that's not something you necessarily need to do. You want to make sure you're hitting those essential foods that have zinc and selenium and iodine, making sure things like you're eating pumpkin seeds that have a great source of zinc. You're eating
Yeah.
a Brazil nut every couple of days for your selenium, those kind of things. But if you're having hormonal imbalance, yes, I would check those.
And I want everyone to catch what she just said. A Brazil nut every couple of days. Brazil nuts are really potent. One Brazil nut has the recommended daily amount of selenium. So awesome
Exactly.
source of it, but don't eat a pound of Brazil nuts. You really could
Right.
overdose. Seriously, it can cause
You
problems.
really could. And I like to look at nature that kind of gives us cues as to how much of things we should be eating. Because when you look at nuts, it takes a little bit to get into them, right? And Brazil nuts, especially. So it kind of says we're not supposed to just be, eating them by the ton, as
Right.
opposed to fruit that you can grab an apple and just eat, right? So it's kind of giving you cues. You only need a little bit of this. Yeah.
Right, right. And in terms of seaweed, I just want to add a word of caution too.
Mhm.
Seaweed can be wonderful, but there are certain types that have a lot of iodine. We actually wrote an article. If you go to
Exactly.
foodrevolution.org and put seaweed in the search bar, you can pull it up and we look at the different amounts and different types. And there are some types where you probably shouldn't eat much, if any, because they are so high in iodine.
A
So
little goes a long way.
it really
Exactly.
does. And these
And
are
I
places we're getting the
know,
right amount is the point. Yeah.
yeah, I know there's a lot of fads that come up like with sea moss and other things, and people are downing it, and you don't need much at all. And so you do have to, go with caution, eat them, but in very moderation, very much so.
What do people need to look out for if they want to avoid disruption to their thyroid gland and their thyroid hormones? What are some of the foods and environmental factors that people should steer clear of?
Yeah. So, well, with foods, as with a lot of health issues, we're looking at processed foods are, definitely hormone disruptors. Lots of sugar, lots of fried foods, all of those are really going to affect the thyroid negatively. Things like our environmental things that we can handle is how much sleep we're getting, we call our sleep hygiene, how much sleep we're getting, because cortisol affects the thyroid quite a bit, and that stress hormone. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then that's going to be, an issue as well. We're looking at other things that affect the thyroid, even things like thyroid cancer, too much excess radiation, even too many dental x-rays and radiation on the neck can be a issue that you want to use judiciously when you're getting dental x-rays and things like that, only when necessary. And so those are definitely environmental things that we want to be aware of. Our body products that have lots of different toxins and um, unnatural products that we really want to avoid. There's a great list of things that I'm sure on your website that you want to avoid in your body products, artificial colorings and other things that are just very unhealthy. So we want to make sure we're using natural toothpaste, natural body products, things, and our cleaning products as well, because we do everything that our hands touch also are going to go into the body. So those kind of things. So it's really kind of doing an overview of everything that's happening in our house. A lot of people spray aerosols, for example, for the house to smell better, but a lot of those have toxins that affect, your thyroid and other things. So we want to make sure we're kind of going clean and green with our products.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that. And what are some of the things we should be eating more of? I mean, you mentioned
Wow.
a few of the things, of course. You talked about getting appropriate mineral balances and iodine, selenium, and zinc. Are there any other particular foods that you think tend to be helpful for
Yeah.
balance
I
hormones?
mean, cucumbers are great for the thyroid. Avocados are great for the thyroid. Leafy greens and things like that. And then, depending on if you're having like thyroid issues like hypothyroidism, um, you might avoid eating, too many concentrated greens, like green juicing might not be the best thing for somebody with hypothyroid. But if you had hyperthyroid, green juicing would be great because it slows down the thyroid a bit. So it's all about that balance. But in general, if we're trying to maintain overall thyroid health, we're looking at, our leafy greens, our fruits, our vegetables, good, healthy, complex carbohydrates like sweet potatoes, brown rice, in balance with those greens. But we want to center the greens first.
Mhm.
And I recommend organic, especially when we're trying to deal with any hormonal issue, because there's the pesticides and things can throw things off as well. So we want to give the body less things to detox from and focus on the things that and just getting those nutrients. So we want to focus on those plant-centered foods as natural as possible. Lots of leafy things, lots of beans, nuts, and seeds are really going to be where you want to focus for that. And I love the cucumber. I love the avocado, like a little Southwest mix of avocado, black beans and cucumber, parsley would be excellent for the thyroid.
Cow's milk comes from lactating mammals
Mm-hmm,
that are often given additional hormones to increase milk production.
mm-hmm.
Um, it stands to reason that hormones would be pretty high in a lactating mammal that's given extra hormones. What's your take on the hormonal impact of cow's milk consumption for humans?
Yeah, that's a great question because a lot of people don't, for whatever reason, make that connection that in order for a cow to give milk, it has to be, pregnant or nursing. And so just by nature of that, there are tons of hormones in it, even without the added hormones, because we have a lot of people who say, well, I'm doing, grass-fed cows and, they don't have the added hormones, but even without added hormones, it's already full of hormones because it's meant for a baby cow to grow very fast. And so any milk product is going to have the IGF-1 growth hormone, right? And that is linked to many types of cancer. So as you know, since thyroid cancer was the thing that I had to deal with, dairy was one of the first things that needed to go from my diet. So that's definitely going to cause excess estrogens and other hormones that we simply do not need or require, especially as adult humans. We don't need any growth hormone. And so that usually causes some type of inflammation in the body, which can also lead to things like goiter, inflammation, starting in the gut and everywhere else. The basis of most disease starts with inflammation. And so we know that is dairy tends to be mucus forming and causes inflammation. And so whether it's natural dairy or raw or whatever, you can't get around the enormous amount of hormones that are just naturally present in milk, because that's what it's made for, is to pass those hormones onto a baby cow that needs them. And so for us, it causes a lot of issues and links to several types of cancer, reproductive cancers, and things like that. So it's important to know that when we're trying to get that good balance, that's something you don't need to be adding to the mix.
What about soy? You mentioned estrogens. A lot of people are worried about phytoestrogens. There's a lot of phytoestrogenic activity in soy. Did you include soy in your healing protocol, and why or why not?
So yeah, it's a great question. So initially I stopped eating soy because I was reading like tons and tons of information, and I realized I was eating a lot of it, like massive amounts, processed soy. After I started, once I was clear of the cancer, I do now include natural soy, tofu, tempeh, miso on a regular basis. And the thing is with phytoestrogens, as many people may or may not know, that it's quite different from animal estrogen. And so we know that it is protective in blocking some of the uptake of animal estrogen when you have the phytoestrogen, which is thousands of times weaker than animal estrogen. So it has a protective effect. And so you'll see some studies that say, eating excessive amounts can cause things like goiter, which I had. In addition to the thyroid cancer, my thyroid was enlarged. So I was like, well, I was eating, quite a bit of soy. So now I eat soy, but I don't overdo it. But not only that, I was eating the processed soy and in large quantities. And now I eat tofu and tempeh primarily as my soy-based sources, and edamame, the natural forms of soy, which are protective and don't tend to cause goiter, because there's somewhere, if you're eating, more than a cup or 2 or 3 cups of soy products, processed soy, the protein soy isolate, then that can cause problems eating too much of that. But soy in its natural form is a healthy protein source. It helps balance some of those hormones, especially going into menopause and things like that. So it is a healthy product that I include. And unlike many people, it doesn't cause, men to have breasts and things like that. It does not do that. There's no evidence of that, when you're eating, especially healthy soy. And I'll mention the other issue that comes up with soy is the GMO soy, and people are like, afraid of that. Well, you can easily avoid that by eating organic soy. And most of the GMO soy is going to farm animals. So if you're eating lots of, cows and pigs and things like that, you're getting that secondhand, the GMO soy, corn, and wheat
Yeah.
anyway. So, you want to eat organic, minimally processed soy is very healthy for the thyroid.
Thank you for raising that GMO point. And a lot of people are concerned about the environmental impact of soy plantations because it's the reality that tropical rainforests are being chopped down or burnt, often to create grazing land for cattle, but sometimes also to create land on which to grow crops. And the main crop being grown on that land is soy. So people are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have my hand on the chainsaw of rainforest destruction. But the truth of the matter is that most of that soy is being used not for humans. It's not going to tofu or tempeh. It's going to livestock feed. So actually, ironically, if you want to reduce the amount of rainforest being chopped down for soy, the number one thing you do is actually to replace beef with tofu, for example, because you literally lead to less soy that way. And so it's an interesting reality. And of course, most of the soy that's being grown for livestock is indeed genetically engineered, and often it's sprayed with glyphosate, which is an endocrine disruptor, as well as a probable carcinogen. And that's being sprayed on the land because it's been engineered to withstand glyphosate. So you can say no to all of that system when you go with organic soy and eat low on the food chain.
Exactly.
Ruby, I'm curious if we could get to some questions now from our Whole Life Club members.
Sure.
Great. Catherine asked, how would you rate mushrooms, especially white button mushrooms, as a natural aromatase inhibitor?
Yeah, those are excellent. That's an excellent question. In general, mushrooms are, something you definitely want to eat for overall health. And that's something that I ate as protection for the thyroid against excess radiation and things like that. So I would definitely, recommend mushrooms, white button mushrooms, but especially, using therapeutic doses of other mushrooms from reishi to, all of the spectrum is what I definitely recommend there.
Yeah, wonderful. Each mushroom has its own unique and valuable contribution to make. We keep learning more about how powerful fungi are for human health, for environmental restoration, for so many things. So yeah, and I love the diversity of them is great. Of course, buttons are the most accessible, but we're getting more and more access to them as people are realizing how awesome they are and how good they are in a kitchen too. You can do great things with mushrooms.
Absolutely.
Linda S. said, I feel like it was a hormonal imbalance that caused my thyroid issues starting at age 53. I'd love to learn about balancing my hormones. I am post-menopausal and I take 45 milligrams HP thyroid medication daily. Is it possible to get off of medication if you have been on it for years?
Absolutely, you can. So there are a lot of natural herbal supplements that I sometimes recommend for people who are needing to balance the hormone. Chasteberry, for example, being one of those, especially when you're, perimenopausal and menopausal. It's also known as Vitex. That's something that absolutely helps balance the hormones. Black cohosh is another one. But yes, you can definitely balance the hormone. And I like the hormones. And I like to make sure we're taking that holistic approach. Let's make sure we're getting outside and exercising because that helps balance the hormones. Sunlight helps balance the hormones. Sleeping enough helps as well. Enough water, all of the things that sound like we should know, but a lot of times we get too busy to do them, actually help. So I like to make sure we're looking at all of the factors, what kind of stressors we're dealing with, and what kind of stress reduction techniques you have to help bring that stress down, because that helps balance the hormones. the sleep and all of that. So along with some, temporary supplementation and making sure the lifestyle is in balance, you can absolutely balance the hormones and get off of hormone thyroid medication.
Thank you. And it bears saying again, we said this at the beginning, this is not medical advice. We're just sharing coaching and our own best insights. But of course, consult with a qualified healthcare professional, and ultimately you're responsible for your own healthcare choices and needs and getting the resources you need to help you thrive. Joanne said, as a post-menopausal female with hair loss and with facial hair, I'm wondering whether there's some type of hormonal imbalance that's contributing. I've been told my testosterone levels are normal. With the family history of breast cancer, I avoided hormone replacement therapy, and until recently, all soy. I've begun eating tofu again. What is a safe level of consumption, generally speaking, for soy products per week? We already touched on this, but maybe we can get a little more granular. And she also said, any other general advice for a 65 plus female who doesn't want to bring the hot flashes back?
Right. Okay. Great question. So in terms of the safe amount of soy products, usually I'd say what I've seen in the research, they're saying safe amounts of like a cup or so a day of a natural soy product is within that range. And so for you, depending on your exercise level or whatever you're doing, it could be more or a little less, but that's around the amount that I've seen that's generally safe for most people. If we're looking at, we want to make sure for things like hair loss, for example, we want to make sure you're eating things that have zinc or even considering a zinc supplement. So that would probably be something she'd want to check. There's a whole list of, vitamins. You can get the vitamin and mineral test to see where you are, to see where some deficiencies may be. But a lot of times, zinc is a factor there with a lot of, several other things. So you want to make sure we're hitting those things to deal with things like hair loss. And what was the last part of making sure I'm answering your question?
Yeah, let's see. There was soy, there was hair loss. She was generally didn't want to have hot flashes come back.
Right, the hot flashes.
Right. Yeah, and has a family
Yeah.
history of breast cancer.
Yeah. So if she's not plant-based, going completely plant-based usually eliminates hot flashes. I've worked with several people, myself included, none of that issue with, having issues with hot flashes and those kind of things, eating a plant-based diet, because usually, as we already mentioned about the hormonal issues with dairy and other things, and as well as other meat products, that tends to throw things off a bit. So,
meat as well can throw off hormonal balance and hot
exactly.
flashes. Okay.
Exactly. So leaning into the plant-based side of things usually either minimizes or eliminates that issue for the most part. So making sure we're looking at diet and that's clean. We also want to make sure there's not excess sugar there in the diet, and other, what we know to be junk foods. All of those things have a significant impact on those kind of hormonal balance issues. And especially as aging women, you want to make sure you're doing weight-bearing exercises to help with hormonal balance and bone health as well. It all works together. So sometimes people shy away from that. And it doesn't mean you have to lifting hundreds of pounds, but you're doing something that is weight-bearing, whether it's yoga or lifting, moderate weights, getting help with that is important as you age. To keep that balance. Working out helps balance, lifting weights helps balance testosterone levels. I think hers were in the normal range, but it helps balance those as well, along with estrogen levels. So that's an important factor too.
Got it. Thank you. Joanne asked a follow-up question about osteoporosis. She said it's common, of course, and she's heard that hormonal imbalances can be a factor. What helpful information might you share about that?
Yeah, well, that's similar, kind of piggybacks on the last thing I just said about weight-bearing exercises. And so That's incredibly important to avoid osteoporosis.
Right.
So staying limber, stretching, yoga, weights, water aerobics with weights, those kind of things are going to help you avoid osteoporosis. And then we've already touched on one of the main factors that is linked to that, dairy products. So eliminating any cow's milk or any other type of animal's milk from your diet will help with that because it helps you retain calcium and things that you already have in your body. And eating healthy beans and greens are going to be like the best sources of calcium. So you don't really necessarily have to supplement calcium if you're eating a good source regularly of beans and greens. Walking and weight bearing exercises generally will keep that at bay.
Got it. Thank you. A lot of people think that they need dairy for calcium because dairy is very high in calcium. Um,
Mhm.
but you're actually kind of saying the opposite, that for strong bones, you don't want to consume a lot of dairy. Is that accurate? Or is
That's
it?
very accurate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research out there that indicates that the increased consumption of dairy products seems to correlate with a greater instances of osteoporosis and those type of bone fractures, things like that. Whereas less dairy correlates with less bone fractures and osteoporosis. So the the research bears that out.
Thank you. We
Mhm.
heard from CEO Bond, who said, I've experienced hot flashes every hour for 5.5 years now. I eat a whole foods plant-based diet, and I'm successful for the most part in not consuming refined sugars or alcohol. I'm reluctant to use any kind of hormone replacement therapy or even estrogen mimicking herbs, as my mom had 2 estrogen receptive breast cancers. Any thoughts on additional dietary support?
Right. So there are other herbs that you can use that are not necessarily estrogen mimicking, like ashwagandha and the Vitex that I mentioned. Those type of things that can definitely DIM is another one that helps with hot flashes specifically. So I would look to work with someone on that so we can maybe kind of get to the root cause and make sure there aren't other issues that are going on as well. But you can certainly shouldn't be having hot flashes every hour and things like that. It shouldn't be that difficult as we go through our natural hormonal changes. And when we have that more balanced lifestyle, we're getting enough water, we're avoiding the endocrine disruptors that come from plastics and body products and all those other things, then those things come into balance. So you really want to take that holistic view,
Mhm.
probably work with someone to make sure we're hitting all of these things, that we're getting the appropriate amount of sleep, that we do things like meditate to bring the
Yes.
stress levels down and all of those things, for sure. But it is something that you shouldn't have to suffer with, and that there are herbal supplements that are natural that can help with that.
Thank you. The 4 core pillars of lifestyle medicine are summed up as eat better, stress less, love more, and move more. And I think that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And you can be
Mhm.
eating great, but if you're not sleeping, you're still going to have a difficult time with your health. And so we need to look at all
Exactly.
of that and look at what is the weakest link in your chain. And so often with all kinds of health problems, they're actually symptoms showing
Mhm.
up of a deeper underlying imbalance. And when we can shore up that weakest link in the chain, whether it's getting better sleep, de-stressing, having a contemplative practice, or practicing meditation, or whether it's exercise or having stronger social ties or more loving connection with the people we care about, all of those things can benefit along, of course, with healthy diet, which is probably the most powerful single thing on that list because it kind of makes everything else possible. Put all that together, and you can often find healing in all kinds of places and issues that show up.
Yeah, I agree. We start with the diet because it's very concrete and it helps set us up for everything else. When the diet is right and you're getting the nutrients that you need, it's much easier to make those lifestyle and habit changes when we're not dealing with, exhaustion because we don't have enough iron or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Mia said, what role does dietary fat play in terms of hormonal health? I'm not referring to unhealthy fats like saturated or trans fats, or those from highly processed seed oils, which I'm guessing can't be favorable. I'm referring to healthy fats like those found in avocados, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, and seeds. If you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet and still experiencing hormonal imbalances, might this be due to eating too much of certain healthy dietary fats?
It can be. I mean, let's say things like olive oil and oils in general, while they're healthy, I still don't recommend a lot of them. Because again, when we look at, I like to take cues from nature. How many olives it takes to press out a teaspoon of olive oil is a lot. So it would be better to eat the olives than to sprinkle on olive oil over the salad, right? Just let's add a few olives to that. So even though things are healthy, you can still overdo it. Um, Avocado is great. Nuts and seeds are great. I would steer clear of added oils or use very little. Um, but those are healthy fats. We don't want to avoid healthy fats. They're there for a reason. Our nuts and seeds are very good for us. So if you're, just eating a moderate amount of those, half avocado a day, those are fine. And depending on your activity, a small avocado a day, that's fine, but not overdoing it. So you can do that. So you really have to get a clearer picture of everything else that's going on. So if the diet is imbalanced, there may still be some nutritional things. Sometimes when we're lacking in certain, vitamin D, for example, helps absorb other vitamins. So we really want to look at a more overall picture to see what's happening as well, and probably steer clear of the oils and go with the whole food.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Neelam said, about 5 years ago, I started to develop numerous food intolerances to healthy plant-based foods, including nuts and seeds and leafy greens and whole grains. I couldn't understand how or why this was happening, but last year I was diagnosed as being perimenopausal. Looking back, I've probably been perimenopausal for about 12 years. I'm convinced that the hormonal imbalance caused by the perimenopause has resulted in gut dysbiosis. I'm currently trying to reintroduce those healthy foods back into my diet following the advice of Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. I'm going low and slow. I also suffer from histamine intolerance, and I have a rare autoimmune condition whereby I'm having allergic reactions to progesterone. I'm living proof of how the hormonal changes can turn a woman's life upside down. Virtually every system in my body has been adversely affected. I'm determined to get my life back on track and refuse to allow the perimenopause to hijack it. Ruby, obviously there's a lot there. Our heart goes out to Neela
Yeah.
and all that she's experiencing. She didn't ask a question per se, and she's obviously on a path now, but do you have any
Mhm.
thoughts that you might share with her?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, um, as she mentioned, there's some autoimmune things happening, and that's usually what triggers new food intolerances is, an autoimmune issue. I'm not 100% sure, I can't diagnose anything, obviously, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's probably all due to perimenopause, because that's not a natural thing that should happen with perimenopause. So there's probably other things that need to be looked at when usually things like that start in the gut. So looking at how to heal the gut from things like leaky gut syndrome usually cause a lot of those other things that she mentioned. So it all starts there. So we're looking at, healthy herbs that heal the lining of the gut. It's really important, from licorice root and other things. Again, you want to get help with that on what to do to take to help heal the lining of the gut. But that's usually where it starts, and and that often starts with, so it's like if the food intolerance starts from the irritation in the lining in the gut and leaky gut syndrome, where does that start from? And a lot of times that starts from excessive stress,
Right.
nonstop stress, or other environmental things that have, come into, our surroundings. So we want to look at that and make sure we're addressing those root causes. And not just saying it's, attributing it to something else, because we want to make sure that we're addressing the whole thing. And I'm glad that she's, on the path to get through this. But you absolutely can heal those kind of things. And it usually starts with resetting the gut. And just because you have a food intolerance that has happened now doesn't mean that that can't be healed, and that at later times you can reintroduce those foods. Because a lot of the foods she mentions are actually the ones you want to eat to have a healthy lifestyle.
Sure.
So looking at the gut health and probiotics and other things there is really where you want to focus, and any emotional things that we need to deal with as well.
I'm drawing an interesting correlation here that I've never really thought of quite so directly, but it's pretty well known in therapy and psychology that people sometimes, everyone needs love, everyone needs human connection, but sometimes when we've been injured in some way, we actually fear it as well. And so people can actually block out the very loving relationships that they may also, part of them needs. And it strikes me that when it comes to food, there are times when an inflammatory response in the body, perhaps to some injury that's occurred, can lead to an experience of the very foods we need as being foreign and being a threat. And it strikes me that there's some interesting parallel there, and that in order to bring deeper healing, we have to address sort of the root causes of that, so that we can find ways to receive the nutrients that we need emotionally as well as physically.
Exactly. I agree wholeheartedly that most things start with our emotional health, and illnesses start with poor emotional health because we haven't dealt with those things, and they just manifest in different ways depending on, our experiences. So that's why I'm like, let's start there and then work forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's so much easier to address sort of psychological challenges when you have the nutrients you need as well. So, so many people who are, dealing with mental health challenges are now finding that when they bring down chronic inflammation in their body, their emotional reactivity goes down, and they become more resilient and resourceful and able to address the roots of some of the challenges that they're facing. Judy said, asked this question, and of course I'll say again, this isn't medical advice, but she's asking
Right.
for your opinion. She said, is taking estrogen safe and beneficial after menopause? What are your general thoughts on the topic?
There's a lot of different, research that goes both ways on that. So it's not something I'm a big fan of. I kind of leave that more with the doctors. I'm more in, let's see if we can balance things, other ways. But so there are a lot of pros and cons to it. And so, it's not something I necessarily recommend, but some people do well with it, but there are risks with it as well. So I'm more on the, let's see if we can balance without necessarily having to supplement that way.
And related to that, Nina asked, I'm wondering if one can totally prevent having hormone replacement with diet and lifestyle. And thinking of the tribes and our ancestors, they wouldn't have any hormone therapy.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is not something that is necessary. I think it's something that our lifestyles have created, again, because all this whole conversation is about balance, right?
Yeah.
Balancing the hormones. And when we're out of balance, that's when we need to supplement. And so even with supplementation, a lot of times we don't need it forever. We need it for a period of time until we have found a way to get it through our food naturally or bring our levels up. So I totally believe that you can go through life, go through menopause and beyond without having to take additional hormone or hormone therapy when we have that healthy lifestyle. When we look at aging as natural, but it doesn't have to be catastrophic. When we continue to do the things that we like, we continue to bike ride, we continue to, work our muscles, we continue to have healthy relationships, you shouldn't necessarily need that.
Thank you. Lisa said, could you discuss post-menopausal hypothyroidism?
Sure. So with that, it's similar to other types of hypothyroidism when you're dealing with how to get it back in balance. We're going to be using similar herbal remedies to help with that, from chasteberry to ashwagandha to other things like that to help. And also making sure we might need to change the amounts of food we're eating. As we get older, our nutritional needs do change. So sometimes we need to bump up the zinc types of foods, and lower some of the things that we were eating that now we can't eat as much of. So it's the same way. We're still going to deal with hypothyroid, whether it's post or pre-menopausal, pretty much in a similar way, but just making sure, looking at any other hormones as well as the thyroid hormones that might be out of balance. So we always want to get a full thyroid panel to see where we are, to help us focus on where we need to look at for other issues. So we still want to focus on those healthy fats, the avocados and the cucumber and the whole grains, the whole complex carbohydrates. We still want to focus on those kind of foods to help, and eating the leafy greens, but not necessarily doing concentrated leafy greens, those kind of things. So same process. It certainly can be done. It just, something you just take one step at a time and get some help with.
Thank you so much. Chandra said, my thyroid is absolutely insane. It fluctuates all over the place. Is gluten an issue for Hashimoto's? I've read so many conflicting things. Some say to eat wheat, others say you shouldn't. I'm working on a plant-based diet. I don't eat meat or dairy. I don't know if I have celiac or not. It is so confusing. Any thoughts for Chandra about gluten in particular?
Yeah, a lot of times when there is a thyroid issue, there's often gluten intolerance that tends to be related to that. So it's something that you consider taking out, which I've done before, kind of eliminated gluten to see if that helps balance things out. That's definitely something I would suggest. But and also with Hashimoto's, there's oftentimes a gluten intolerance. Again, so that goes with, we want to deal with the hormones, but then let's look at what's happening in the gut that's causing the intolerance to begin with. So so anytime we're dealing with thyroid issues, we're also, especially things like Hashimoto's, we're also usually dealing with gut issues, because the thyroid is so sensitive to the gut, and the gut is our second brain, which holds a lot of the stress there. So I think that's why those things are linked. So usually people with thyroid issues have things that we need to look at, like are we speaking out when we need to? For example, when I was dealing with hypothyroid and I was dealing with thyroid cancer and enlarged thyroid, I realized when I start doing the work of the emotional work that's underlying this, I realized, oh, I was the consummate people pleaser to my own demise. I realized I needed to find my voice and speak out for myself and create the healthy boundaries that I did not have. And a lot of times when people are dealing with thyroid issues, that's a common thread that I've seen many, many times of, what are we doing too much of? What are we giving too much of and depleting ourselves? Or what do we need more of? Do we, like, as you mentioned, more relationships, more loving, more kindness to ourselves? So, and that relates to the gut and the stress, how we deal with stress. The type of relationships we have affect our stress levels. If we don't have the healthy networks, we're generally going to have more stress and deal with it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
That then leads to those to a weakened lining of the gut, which causes intolerances. So we want to start there. So definitely, I usually would recommend stopping gluten for a period of time to see if that helps with the symptoms you may be having, and then dealing with any emotional issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, the proof's in the pudding, so to speak, with gluten, that when you take a break from it, see if you get benefit. And if you do, you might, after a while, try introducing a little bit of very conscious source, like sprouted wheat berries that you cook well, or something that's very unprocessed, make sure they're organic. And then you can sort of weed out various factors. Maybe it was the flour, maybe it was the processing, maybe it was something else you were having with the gluten. Maybe you've calmed down the reactivity and you can have a little bit, or maybe not. Some people, I don't know what percentage, obviously 1 to 2% have celiac disease, but some other percentage of people are gluten sensitive or gluten intolerant, or don't respond well to it. So you ultimately have to look at it. But if anybody who's having ongoing symptoms and they're are eating a fundamentally healthy diet and practicing all the basic principles of lifestyle, and they're still dealing with those things, then if they're still eating gluten, I generally recommend taking a break. I tend to think about 3 months is good to get it cleared out of the system. What do you tend to say, Ruby, for when people can say, okay, either it is or isn't helping? What's the point that you assess that?
Right. Usually, and I've seen people take it out and within, even less time notice a difference without
Yeah.
doing it. But 3 months is always a good marker to stop and check and recheck things as well. So I agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
got it.
yeah, and I agree. It's also the different types of wheat. As other people say, well, I ate wheat in Italy and I didn't have any reaction that I had here. So a lot of times it's the type of wheat. And when you're looking at breads, for example, they're definitely not all created equal. There's some that have so many other things that you don't want to consume
Yes.
versus a basic bread. So you do want to read the labels, and that's a whole nother discussion of the things we want to be looking for, and making sure the food's very clean. And definitely with any wheat sensitivity, I always say go organic with that, and the fewer ingredients, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most commercial or a lot of commercial wheat today is sprayed with glyphosate as a desiccant to dry out the crop before harvest. So even if it's not genetically engineered, it still may be sprayed with glyphosate, and that ends up in our bodies. And
Right.
so some people may also have a reaction to that. So this is one of those places where organic really matters too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Liana said, could you address potential causes of estrogen dominance and how to increase progesterone naturally, either through food or lifestyle?
Yeah. So one of the things with estrogen dominance is um, weightlifting, especially for women. Obviously, and we're not talking heavy weights, but lifting weights helps balance that estrogen, because it helps raise up the progesterone and the testosterone. We naturally have that. So when you do consistent weights, like 3 times a week, that's going to help balance that out. So that's number one. So making sure you're active, making sure you're doing something that makes you sweat, to whatever your fitness level is. So again, this is something you want to work with someone on because it doesn't go across the board. So whatever your fitness level is, we want to make sure we're walking or doing something that creates some detox naturally, and sweating helps with that. So we want to make sure we're moving, we're walking, and that we're lifting something. And then we want to look at the diet and make sure we're eliminating the things we've already mentioned in this conversation, like meat and dairy, excess sugar, caffeine. Those kind of things are things you want to leave out, and increase the cucumbers, the leafy greens, and those kind of things. So you can definitely balance the hormones naturally through that. And then making sure we're getting the sleep and all those things as well.
I have a somewhat unrelated, slightly
Mhm.
related question that just occurred to me. I have a friend who's going through hot flashes right now in the menopausal cycle. And I just got curious. Do you think that exercise to the point of sweating has any effect, especially if one does it regularly, on hot flashes? And is there any research around that?
I have to think about that specific thing, but I know exercise in general helps regulate that.
Yeah.
So it definitely helps.
Mhm.
And it's not going to, I've never seen anything that says the more you exercise, the more hot flashes you're gonna
Right.
have, or the
Yeah.
opposite. So it's definitely something you want to do
Mhm.
regularly, because not only does it help with that, the hormonal balance, it releases the endorphins and other feel good things that are going to help with your overall mental health as well.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, one more question from our members, and then I have a final wrap-up question for you.
Sure, sure.
Rob said, could you address the interplay of cortisol and androgens and how to balance or boost testosterone with food and lifestyle?
hmm Yeah, so we know that when there is not enough sleep, your cortisol goes up. When there's chronic stress, the cortisol goes up, and all of those things. So we want to, the way to bring the cortisol down through lifestyle is going to be meditation. It's going to be going outside and touching earth, what's called grounding, getting your
Uh-huh.
feet in grass or dirt or rocks or whatever, natural earth, brick, that actually brings those hormones that we're trying to bring down. It naturally helps bring those down. So we want to create a lifestyle where we are in nature regularly every day, even if it's just a 20-minute walk. And if you have that time to also stop and meditate for 15 minutes, you're going to start bringing those down naturally, even before we even get to the food. And so those are the lifestyle things. And then also, as we've already mentioned, weights and exercise is definitely going to help. And the thing with women in menopause, we if we've been used to just doing aerobics and things like that, that's worked. But something happens around the menopause times, we need to add, in the perimenopause and the menopause, we need to add some weight bearing things to help keep the balance that we were able to keep before. So it's a great thing to just build it in naturally, so you don't have to add it. So working out, walking fast, sweating, whatever it is to get you a little natural detox. And then also the same food things that we've already talked about here, because this kind of covers several things. So
Yeah.
eliminating those issues that we've talked about, the dairy, the meat, the fast food, the processed food, excess oil, we want to leave those out. That's also going to help bring things in balance. Fruit, lots of fruit, but you do want to have good protein, natural plant-based protein sources regularly as well. So you want to focus on that as well, so that you're feeling satisfied and full and getting those protein needs met. Although there's protein in all fruits and veggies, they're just more abundant in that beans, nuts, and seeds. So we want to focus on those. And then adding the leafy greens and all those other things to it. So a very clean diet that is fulfilling and satiating at the same time.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Mhm,
So, Ruby, we're nearing the end of our time. I guess I want to ask for something a little more personal for you. What is
mhm.
it that moves you to do the work that you do? What is it really about for you?
Yeah, absolutely. My career before this, I was an engineer working in defense. And when I was, faced with cancer and deciding that I felt like my body could heal itself if I did the research to figure it out. And when I found that it's really what's on my plate and changing my on the go lifestyle, and meeting my personal emotional needs, I'm like, I can reverse something that life threatening with what's on my plate and lifestyle. I felt like everybody needs to know this. Everyone needs to know, because people started asking me, how I did it. And so it's not something you hide under a rock. You just have to tell people, because I would see
Mhm.
people, you're just eating yourself to sickness or things like that. And it breaks my heart to see that. And then the other piece of it was seeing my grandmother, who had diabetes, something that is highly reversible with diet and lifestyle,
Mhm.
which I didn't know at the time. But seeing her have to go through that and suffer with all the side effects of, diabetes, neuropathy, and eventually dying because of symptoms of that. And then having my own experience and realizing, wow, if I know we just had to change the diet, we could have reversed that. It just put me on a mission to share with everyone that we have the power within ourselves, with the knowledge that we can take charge of our health and our life. And we need to
Yes.
get this information out there, the type of information you share regularly, the type that I share. People need to know, so that we can make these systemic changes, so that we're not just dying because of the status quo of food development and all these
Mhm.
things, that we need to make changes so that we can live our healthy lives. And that's what drives me.
I mean, it's so powerful, you had your own reckoning, your own dark night of the soul, feeling your mortality, facing what would happen if you continued on the path you were on. You made
Mhm.
big changes, you experienced transformation. You've seen what happens when we follow the standard American diet. You've seen that
Exactly.
something else is possible, and now you're passionate about helping other people to experience the kind of transformation you've experienced so that we can have freedom, so that we can have joy, so we can live the lives we were born to live. What a beautiful story. So moving. Ruby, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your insight, for
Sure.
your story, for your passion, and for being with us today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope, I know we've helped some people here, and I just appreciate the opportunity to share.
All right. To everyone watching, thanks so much for joining us for this whole life action hour. We wish you health, vitality, joy, peace, balanced hormones, and a long, vibrant, healthy life. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.